so they keep on fighting. But throughout the month of September, it becomes more and more desperate. And early on in October, it's obvious that the uprising has been lost. They enter into negotiations for another time, the Poles and the Germans, that is. And on October 2nd, they strike a deal that from the next day, October 3rd, there will be an armistice, and there won't be any more shooting. The Poles will capitulate. The members of the Home Army will have to go into camps for prisoners of war in Germany, and they will have to hand over all their weapons. This entire episode is good news for the Soviets. They have managed to, in many ways, get rid of a very well armed and organized military underground that is hostile to their attempts to take over Poland. At the same time, the Germans have been busy fighting the Poles for 2 months, and that has given the Red Army some respite. They are able to start rebuilding their forces in the area, which had been quite depleted after this Operation Bagration and the general offensives during the spring and summer. At the same time, the Soviets have been starting to prioritize another area. Instead of advancing to Warsaw and continue through Poland to try to head to Berlin as quickly as possible, they decide to take a different route and go south instead into Romania, into Hungary, and towards the Balkans. They decide to take over as large areas as possible in Central and Eastern Europe, instead of trying to go for Berlin immediately. They, of course, want to make sure that these areas come under the control of the Soviet Red Army instead of under the control of the Western Allies, as especially Churchill had some ideas to go through Greece and up the Balkans. So the Soviets, they don't really make another push west until January 1945. So from August 1st, when they really stop their offensive on the outskirts of Warsaw, there really isn't any offensive action again for another 5 or 6 months. So it is also one of those moments in history that you can start wondering, if there was no Warsaw Uprising, then potentially the Red Army would have been able to regroup quickly in the area and head straight west, and potentially reaching Berlin not in May 1945, but maybe as early as in January or February 1945, meaning that also the Western Allies would have been much further to the east than they were at the moment when the war ended. So technically, maybe there wouldn't have been a Western Germany. Maybe that Cold War border, the Iron Curtain, would have crossed through.
Well, that's indeed very possible.
Yeah, through it could have crossed through the Netherlands, for example, somewhere, and down to Switzerland. So certainly one of those what-if moments that historians can spend a lot of time thinking about. But what was clear for the Poles was that any illusion that Soviet rule of Poland could be avoided, or that it could somehow be not absolutely murderous as it had been between 1939 and 1941 of those areas that the Soviets control, that quickly became apparent for the Poles and for the rest of the Cold War and the 1990s and until today. The Poles have no illusions about the ideas and motivations that drive Russian foreign policy. So once they attacked Ukraine with their full-scale invasion in 2022, the Poles, the Baltic states, and other people in this region that are used to the Russian modus operandi and the modus vivendi as well, they have no illusions. But sometimes people in the West, they simply
Yes, very naive.
seem to be naive.
Seem to always try to see the best of the Soviet, then latterly the Russian side, which is strange. Very, very strange. And those people tend to be called Germans and French for the avoidance of doubt. Sorry, but it is remarkable, isn't it? It doesn't matter how much evidence there is of the general ill intent of the Russians when it comes to the immediate neighbours to the West. People still want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yes, this is why we're here to talk about giving off-ramps to Vladimir Putin to leave the war, but also saving his own face, as Mr. Macron suggested at one point, or initially you had Chancellor Scholz that would be frequently on the phone to Putin, believing that he could somehow convince him to, just by mere words, not by putting any military pressure or by military aid that initially was not sent to Ukraine by the Germans. And initially he thought that maybe a few phone calls could do the work instead.
Adam, as usual, we've come to the end of the segment, so I'm going to have to ask you to pause there, but we'll pick it up next time. There we are. I've had to interrupt Adam almost in mid-sentence, but fear not, if you join us next time, as we hope you will, we'll continue the story. In the meantime, thank you for watching Poland Daily History, and we look forward to seeing you next time.